I pray that the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our strength and our Creator. Amen. If you're not willing to risk the unusual, well, then you'll have to settle for the ordinary. And one of the things I've always been fascinated by is how quickly the early church grew. I mean, how it started with just this one man, Jesus of Nazareth, and his tiny little group of women and men who were willing to risk the unusual to follow him. And it grew so rapidly that in a matter of a few thousand years, which really isn't that long in the big scheme of things, in those few thousand years, it would touch the farthest corners of the earth. It would establish itself enough to make places like St. John's Episcopal Church in Roanoke, Virginia, and thousands more like it, possible. And what's amazing to me is that it grew the most in a day and age where there was no technology really to help get that message out. There were no email listservs where you could contact or harass, depending on your point of view, hundreds of people, right, by just the push of a button. There were no documentaries you could make that you could put out there on YouTube or release to DVD. There were no podcasts to stream. There's no social media where you could push things out there on Facebook and Instagram or tweet about it so people would get their attention and follow it. And yet, this young community, it didn't just grow, it thrived. In our gospel story today, we get a little peek into how exactly that happened. Personal invitations. That's what it was. Personal invitation. Now, last week we heard about the baptism of Jesus in the River Jordan. And after that event, John the Baptist begins to tell all of his followers that, hey, you need to actually be following this Jesus. That's who you should be following. And so they do that. I mean, literally, at first, just following Jesus from a distance, looking at him. And finally, Jesus turns to them and he says, what do you want? What are you looking for? And he doesn't try to give them some long explanation. And when they say they don't know, he says, well, you know what? Come and see, he says. And that's what they do. Now, one of those men's name was Andrew, and he got so excited about spending a day with Jesus that he goes and he finds his brother Simon, and he says, you really have got to come and check this Jesus dude out. And Simon would then go on to become, of course, Peter. And then that's where our gospel story today picks up. The very next day, Jesus finds another man. His name was Philip, and he says to Philip, follow me. And Philip, he gets so excited about Jesus that he goes to look for his friend Nathanael. And when he finds him hanging out under a fig tree, that he tells him that, you really need to come and check this guy out because he's the real deal. And even when Nathanael answers with some sarcasm and a skeptical response, Philip just steals Jesus' line and simply says, Nathanael, come and see. And so it began. Friend to friend, family member to family member, person to person, each one encouraging the next to come and see what Jesus could mean for their life as God's family grew more and more every day. And it's fun to think about how great it must have been and the energy behind it and how everyone was so happy and on board and excited, except for the fact that I'm pretty sure that's not exactly how it always went. I mean, my guess is that not everybody they invited was willing to come and see what this was all about. Not everyone was willing to leave their old life behind, leave their old ways behind, and embrace this new one. I mean, lots of people are fine with the ordinary, right? I mean, ordinary is comfortable. Ordinary is safe. Now, Nathanael was openly skeptical about Jesus, mostly just because of where he was from, though he was right in some sense that nobody important by the world's standards probably came from Nazareth. But even though Nathanael goes and eventually he's convinced by encountering Jesus, his initial response is telling because it honestly portrays how how difficult it is for people to just sort of recklessly plunge into something that they don't fully understand and they don't know the details of. Now, our lives today, we have become pretty guarded with our time and our energy. Understandably, though, because there is so much that is out there competing for them that it can be pretty overwhelming for us at times. And as a result of that, we are hesitant when it comes to signing up for things or taking on new responsibilities or trying new things out. Hesitant because we don't want to add even one more thing sometimes to already packed lives. And that's just not out there in our normal lives, but that is the case here too in our church life. Last Sunday, I tried after church to hand someone one of our programming calendars out there, those long things with all the thing. And, I felt so bad about the terrible, panicked look on their face as I tried this, right? I could read their minds. It was like, oh no, what's he doing? He's looking at me. Why is he handing me that? What is he handing me? Is this something he wants me to sign up for and do? Try and avoid eye contact. Quickly walk right by him, right? I felt like they needed a hug more than they needed a list of opportunities. By the way, actually that reminds me, we'll be handing out programming calendars after church in the narthex. So please take one, bring it home, put it on your fridge. It tells you all the things you can sign up for and do in the next months. Our lives, they're full and more stressful than any of us want. And so again, understandably, we don't want to do anything before we often know all the specifics, right? We want to know the details. We want to know exactly what's involved. Well, what's the time commitment? How it will go? We want to know all that before we decide if we're going to go for it and give it a chance. But here's the thing. That's just not how it works with Jesus. When Jesus says, come and see, he isn't telling us exactly how it will go because really there's no way for us to know. He isn't inviting us to some one-time event or a two-meeting commitment. He's inviting us into a way of life. He's inviting us to join a journey that's going to have ups and downs, and it's going to have dips and turns, a journey that will constantly change around us and constantly change us as well. And we have to step out in faith and join him on this journey. We have to go with him if we want to see what it really means to live this life, to be with him, and to follow him. And here's the thing. Jesus wasn't and isn't some concept to try and understand, right? That's a mistake people have been making for hundreds of years. And faith isn't something that you could fully understand or ever really wrap your head around and know. That's also a mistake people have been making for hundreds of years. Jesus is someone that has to be experienced. Faith is something that has to be lived out and to be understood. Your heart and your body are just as important as your brain. Jesus said, come and see, not because he was being coy or elusive or anything like that, but what he wanted for them wasn't something that he could just tell them. He had to show it to them. He had to live it out with them. He had to experience it with them. And the same really, it goes for us. We can't ever fully get it unless we experience it. When my younger sister, who is the baby of our family, when she turned 18, she decided that she wanted to celebrate becoming an official adult by going skydiving, all right? Now, I guess being adult meant that she could now make bad decisions on her own, right? So that's what she was going to do. But she does what she wants to do. Trust me, she does what she wants to do, and she was going. Now, good luck, I told her. That's what my response was. And she said, thanks, but hopefully we won't need it. We? I said. Now, I should also tell you that it's almost impossible for anyone in my family, including big brothers, to say no to said baby of family, right? And so when she decided that she would celebrate her birthday by jumping out of a plane and hurtling towards the ground wearing a small backpack, with her brothers alongside her, well, that's what we were doing, I guess, right? Now, obviously, I've heard about skydiving before I went. People would say, oh, how awesome it was, and it was so great, and this and that. But it didn't really sound that awesome to me. I mean, I could think of other ways that I would rather risk my life. That included my hands or feet being on some solid object. But for me, more than anything, it's just not that I was scared, but it's just I couldn't wrap my head around it, skydiving. I mean, I couldn't understand it on a logical or practical level, so I didn't really get what the big deal was. I mean, I had so many questions, like, what would it be like to be outside of the airplane rather than inside it, right? I mean, is it cold? Is it hard to breathe? I mean, do you feel like you're falling fast or feel like you're falling slow? I mean, I thought of all sorts of important questions, like, in the unfortunate case that I threw up, would it come right back and hit me in the face, I mean, I thought about that kind of stuff, honestly. I mean, there was just so much that was unknown about it that I didn't really know what to even expect. But if you're not willing to risk the unusual, you'll have to settle for the ordinary. And so, Lord help me, I was in. Now, the day we got there, we pulled up to this tiny little place out in the middle of the country, and I was wondering if I should have been more hands-on in deciding where we did this adventure. Because there was this old prop plane sitting in the grass that looked small and very worn out, and we had a good laugh about it. We joked, about how funny and really scary it would be if that was the plane that we were actually going to be going up in, right? I mean, we looked around for the big, shiny, modern, safe plane that was be kept in a hangar somewhere, obviously. Well, it wasn't so funny anymore when the instructor came out and said, yeah, that's exactly the plane that we're going up in. And from there, I had thousands of questions for the instructor. If you know me, that's how I am. I mean, I wanted to know details. I wanted to know the schedule. I wanted to know the specifics. I wanted to know what it would feel like. I wanted to know how the experience would go. I mean, finally, he stopped me and he said, bro, and yes, he used the word bro, trust me. Bro, he said, you just got to experience it. You can't stress about the details. You just have to go for it and enjoy the adventure, which I guess was his version of come and see. And I did, and to wrap this very long story up, we went up in the plane very slowly with lots of vibrating, but we did, and we jumped out of it, and we landed on the ground safely, and we took a video while we were up there of us holding hands, and we had this birthday candle, and it was awesome, and it was fun, and it was an amazing experience, and it was cold, but I could breathe, and I didn't throw up, and after experiencing it all, after going through it and just living it out, I could totally understand then, after the fact, why people would love it so much, really. Because if you're not willing to risk the unusual, you'll have to settle for the ordinary. Following Jesus and being part of a church community, a community of faith like ours, it is somewhat of an unusual thing. I mean, it was for Philip and Nathaniel and Mary and all of his early followers, and it is that way for us today. I mean, it's unusual in that it's a different way to live your life. I mean, it's living, acknowledging that you value different things than some of the people around you. I mean, you believe different things. You hope for different things. You love different things. And to fully immerse yourself in this way of Jesus, to answer his come and see, and to share in this adventure with him and your fellow brothers and sisters in God's family, it is risky in some ways. Risky in that when you choose to leave behind the ordinary ways, you're going to miss out on some things. And prioritizing your time and your commitments to church and to family life, you might even be looked at a little differently. But it's a risk worth taking. Because this unusual life is so much deeper than an ordinary life. I mean, it's a life filled with meaning and purpose and forgiveness and grace and hope and love and all of those amazing things. It's a life that's so wonderful. I mean, how could we not want to invite others to share in it too? A lot has changed in our world since those early days of Jesus and his followers, but really some things haven't changed. I mean, personal invitation is still the best way to get people to try something unusual and share an adventure, an experience with you. I mean, personal invitation is still the best way to bring people into this life of Jesus and his faith community. You know, I went for a walk with my daughter in the woods on our farm this past week on a snow day with no snow, and as we talked and as we laughed, I was thinking that as we walked that maybe the reason the early church grew was because it didn't have screens and technology. I mean, people actually, talk to each other. I mean, that's weird, right? Face to face, person to person. They talked about the past and the future, about joys and hurts and life and death. They talked about fears and hopes and excitement and pain and doubt and faith. Talked about loved ones and friends. Talked about God and Jesus, and why they were so important and what they meant for the way they lived their lives each and every day. See, that's how it began. And that's how it continues. Friend to friend, family member to family member, person to person, each one encouraging the next to come and see what Jesus could mean for their life as God's family grows more and more each day. Because if you're not willing to risk the unusual, you'll have to settle for the ordinary. Amen.